When I was 17 years old, at the height of my puberty and self-awareness, my mother came to visit me at school. This wasn't your routine visit. It was a special visit because I was just about to sit for my Senior 6 exams. And the school had given us forms to fill out to show what courses we wanted to do in university. Naturally, because I knew what I wanted, I didn't feel the need to consult with anyone. I filled in my forms. But at this particular visit, my mom is there and I'm explaining to her, oh yeah, so I filled in this form and I want to do mass communications. And she looked at me and said, no, you're going to do law. And that's the end of it. Of course I was gutted. I would have expected her to be, excited with what was exciting me at the moment. But anyway, I went ahead and did law, and I can say now that I have 3 degrees in law. So, and this legal training is what has created the foundation for the love of policy that I have today, and the reason why I'm standing here speaking to you about policy making. So just like our parents, our governments, they play a very central role in our lives. They plan for us, and in that, they plan, they create budgets, they allocate resources, and that is what is part of the whole strategy for policy and policy making. Sometimes we might not agree with some of the things that they say or they plan for us. That's beside the point. So, going back to the story of my mother, I study law, but then I go back and study 1 more degree in public policy. But this time I didn't run it by her. I didn't want her to, influence that decision. So when I came back, I had the opportunity to work in the office of the president. We worked on policies. I understood how policies are made. I understood who the key actors are in policies, in policy making. I understood the role of the officials and the appointed officials, but also the influential stakeholders that we never really pay attention to or even know that they exist. But they make these decisions on our behalf. And just like our parents, these decisions are meant to provide us with a safe environment, make sure that we have access to affordable electricity, water, and education. So why does policy making matter? I remember when I got my job as a legal and policy analyst, I knew exactly what the legal part entailed, but I didn't know what the policy part entailed. So I walked to my immediate supervisor at the time, Mr. Washira Maina, and I entered his office and said, Washira, so what is policy? He looked at me and he said, I'm going to give you the 1 lesson if you're ever going to become a policy person that you need to keep at the back of your mind. With every policy, and he said, with every policy, there are always winners and losers. So take a minute and think about that. For most of us here, we don't really care about policies unless they affect you, or someone you care about. And that's when you're like, oh, hold on, how did this come about? And that is not at that point that we should care. We should care before. Because if you take a minute and think about it, the problems we face today are not new. They're just evolving, becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And that means governments have to devise strategies to respond to these issues that we face. In 2034, Africa is going to have the biggest youth population, the highest rate of urbanization, with lots of people moving into the cities. These are all issues that are going to affect us going forward. But of course, governments don't always match, sometimes, they don't always match the pace at which we are also trying to face these issues. Because they face, truth be told, some of them are still bureaucratic, They don't reward innovation or even invest in it. They still have these rigid rules, especially around procurement, that stifle creativity. But do you know the beauty about it all today is that all these rigidities are juxtaposed by the fact that right now we are living in an era of unprecedented access to knowledge. This knowledge has made us woke. It has made us aware. We are increasingly putting excessive demands on our governments for accountability and to provide us with better services. So governments cannot sit back and not work with us to provide us with the services that we need. So to do this, governments have to innovate. See, for most people, when you think about innovation, you think about tools, you think about products, you think about, that is what comes to everyone's mind. But innovation in government is around finding new working methods, very creative methods to provide citizens with services that are affordable, quick, and easy to access. And we're now living in an era of technology, and there's quite a number of tools that are available for our governments to use. So for this particular talk, I'd like to talk about 3 issues. Co-creation of policies through design thinking. I mean, for many of you who are in the startup community and the tech world, you understand what design thinking is. But it's basically breaking it down, thinking about a problem differently, looking at it differently, employing empathy and listening and working together with the communities that you serve to create solutions for their problems. My first experience with co-creation through design thinking was in 2015, and I was working on a project in North Carolina, and we had to work with a city that wanted to become entrepreneurial, and so my team and I went to this city that we were working with. We interacted with the people in the city, we interacted with the city officials, and it was so amazing that collaboration, that coordination with the people and listening to what people wanted ended up being the basis for the strategy that we came up for the city government, which is, instead of thinking about it in the sense of how do we give more government support to these people, instead the citizens were telling the city officials, how about we want to create this city into a livable city as a festival city or an art scene. In a way, I was excited because I understood the power of collaboration and co-creation for participative and inclusive policies. And that is something I think we can adopt today. But also, again, we go back to the issue of data. Governments have always been the custodians of all the data that we have. If you look at the statistics, I think we produce about 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every day and more. This is an opportunity for us, an opportunity for our governments to exploit, evaluate data, and give us decisions that are unbiased and not discriminatory. There's actually a platform that I read about in the UK that uses, it's called Predictive, and they provide an online platform within which they test out the new policies to a small group of people online, and the results that they use, the results that they get, are able to inform them whether they can now roll it out nationwide or start again. Again, these are just simple ways of working, changing the formula of how we work in order to provide very clear and inclusive decisions. And lastly, and I think my most, the one method that I think is very poignant and interesting. How do we communicate as policymakers? How do we communicate to engage and not communicate to inform? The power of storytelling. We all love good stories, right? That is why we're here tonight, to listen to all these amazing stories. But the power of storytelling in policymaking is even much more profound because it bridges the gap between the policymaker and the people that they're planning for. Hearing those individual experiences from these people telling you, this is the impact of your policy on my life, kind of creates a different perspective in the policymaker's mind. And today we even have more tools, especially the digital tools, because we all understand policies are complex. So we can break it down to what the public understands. We can use memes, we can use songs, videos, photographs. I mean, there's quite a number of digital tools that we can manipulate, we can use in order to soften the process and make it easier for people to understand. And that way, that relationship, working with our communities, building cohesion, co-creating, we are able to provide policies that are reflective of the issues that we have today and probably laying the foundation for where we're going forward. When I started this talk, I told you about my mother and the decision that she made for me. In the short term, yes, it did make sense, but in the long term, I've come to appreciate it. And similarly, if we put government in that position, we may have to cut them some slack, but work with them in order to produce the policies and responses that we need. So I leave this slot this evening, by challenging you. After listening to all this, me putting all these methods out there, what is your role as a young person seated here? How are you going to involve yourself in the whole process of policy making in order to produce the policies that you want, for the Rwanda that we want, for the country that we want, and for the world that we want for tomorrow? Thank you very much.